bottle shattered against the frat house wall like a gunshot in the dead of night, shards exploding across the sticky floor as Elijah's fist connected with Jake's jaw, blood spraying in a crimson arc that caught the strobe lights. "You think you can just take what's mine, you fucking snake?" Elijah roared, his voice raw over the thumping bass, but inside, the words tasted like ash, because deep down he knew this fight wasn't about the girl or the bet. It was about the void gnawing at his chest, the one no amount of cheap whiskey could fill. And then, as sirens wailed in the distance and the party dissolved into chaos, Elijah bolted into the rain-slicked streets of Boston, his heart pounding not from fear, but from the sudden, terrifying certainty that if he didn't stop running tonight, he'd never stop at all. He didn't know why his feet carried him to the university library at 2 a.m. Maybe because it was the one place on campus that never judged, or maybe because the weight of his soaked hoodie felt like chains he needed to shake off. The massive oak doors creaked open under his desperate shove, and the silence hit him like a slap, cool and absolute, swallowing the echo of his ragged breaths. Rows of towering shelves stretched into shadows, lit only by the faint glow of emergency lights, and there, behind the circulation desk like a ghost in flannel, sat Theo, the night shift librarian no one ever noticed, his nose buried in a dog-eared copy of The Great Gatsby, oblivious to the storm that had just crashed through his sanctuary. Elijah froze, water dripping from his hair onto the faded Persian rug, his knuckles still throbbing from the punch. Theo looked up slowly, his wire-rimmed glasses slipping down the bridge of his nose, hazel eyes widening not in alarm but in a quiet curiosity that pierced straight through Elijah's defenses. "Rough night?" Theo asked, his voice soft as worn pages. No trace of accusation. Just that steady calm that made Elijah's chest tighten in a way punches and parties never had. Elijah laughed, a bitter bark that echoed too loud, and slumped into the nearest armchair, the fight draining out of him like ink in water. "You could say that. World ending out there, man. In here. Shit. It's like another planet." Theo didn't pry, didn't call security or shoo him out like the trespasser he was. Instead, he slid a towel from under the desk, crisp, smelling faintly of old books and chamomile tea, and pushed it across the counter without a word. Elijah took it, their fingers brushing for a split second, and that touch lingered like a spark on dry tinder. He wiped his face, stealing glances at the guy who'd become campus legend for his invisibility. Mid-20s, lean build under a cable-knit sweater, dark curls tamed just enough to look effortless, and a smile that rarely showed but promised depths Elijah had never bothered to explore in anyone. "You're Theo, right? The ghost who keeps this place alive after hours." Theo's lips quirked, the barest hint of amusement. "Guilty. And you're Elijah Harper, the one who turned the quad fountain into an Olympic-sized beer pong table last semester." Heard the stories. There was no judgment in his tone, just fact, laced with something warmer, like he saw the punchline but got the punch too. Elijah's stomach flipped. No one ever saw him like that. Not the real wreckage beneath the bravado. They talked, or rather Elijah rambled, about the fight, the betrayal by his so-called best friend over some sorority girl who meant nothing, the way the rain tasted like regret on his tongue. Theo listened, nodding at the right moments, his responses sparse but sharp, cutting through Elijah's bullshit like a well-placed footnote. By 4 a.m., the adrenaline crash hit, and Elijah's eyelids grew heavy, the armchair cradling him like an old friend. "Don't kick me out," he mumbled, half joking, half pleading. Theo hesitated, then pulled a blanket from a lower shelf, soft wool, probably for late-night study marathons, and draped it over him. "Libraries for lost souls, Elijah. Stay as long as you need." Those words wrapped around Elijah tighter than the blanket, chasing away the chill, and as sleep claimed him, he dreamed not of shattered glass or howling sirens, but of hazel eyes and the quiet promise of pages yet to turn. Morning light filtered through the high arched windows like hesitant fingers, stirring Elijah from a sleep deeper than he'd had in months. His neck ached from the awkward slump, but the pounding headache he'd braced for was absent, replaced by the rich aroma of fresh coffee wafting from the desk. Theo was there, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, pouring 2 mugs from a battered French press, steam curling like secrets in the air. "Figured you'd need this more than a wake-up call," Theo said, sliding one over with a cream cheese bagel on the side. No fanfare, just quiet efficiency. Elijah sat up, blanket pooling in his lap, suddenly hyper-aware of his rumpled clothes and the faint bruise blooming on his cheek from Jake's retaliatory swing. "You didn't have to do that. Hell, you could have had me arrested for breaking in." Theo shrugged, settling into the chair opposite, his own mug cradled in both hands like a talisman. "Locks were open, and besides, I've seen worse walk through these doors. Freshmen cramming for finals on Red Bull and regret. You're just human." That word, human, landed soft but heavy, stripping away Elijah's armor without a fight. No one called him that anymore. To his frat brothers, he was the king of chaos, the guy who could chug a six-pack and still ace a pop quiz on charm alone. But here, in this vault of forgotten knowledge, he felt seen, raw and real. They lingered over breakfast like it was the most natural thing, the library's hush amplifying every rustle of newsprint Theo skimmed from the Boston Globe. Elijah peppered him with questions. How a guy like Theo ended up shelving dusty tomes instead of chasing the corner office dream. What drew him to the night shift where the ghosts outnumbered the patrons. Theo's answers came measured, laced with a dry wit that snuck up on you. Daylight's too loud. Too many expectations. Here, it's just me, the books, and the occasional poltergeist knocking over encyclopedias. He paused, eyes flicking to Elijah's bruised knuckles. "What about you, Reckless Elijah? Is that a title you earned or one they slapped on?" Elijah leaned back, the truth bubbling up unbidden, fueled by the coffee's warmth. Born in a crumbling South Boston row house to a dad who fixed lobster boats and a mom who waitress doubles, he'd clawed his way into Boston University on a partial scholarship and sheer spite. College was supposed to be his escape, but it became his cage. Parties as armor against the homesickness, hookups as distractions from the gnawing fear that he wasn't built for anything steady. It's easier to be the storm than the ship, you know? Storms don't sink. Theo's gaze held his, steady as a lighthouse, and for the first time, Elijah wondered what it might feel like to drop anchor. That afternoon, as the library stirred to life with undergrads shuffling in for midterms, Elijah should have left, headed back to the frat house to face the fallout, the inevitable texts from Jake demanding a rematch. But he didn't. He wandered the stacks instead, Theo's subtle nods guiding him like breadcrumbs. A worn copy of On the Road for the Wanderlust in his veins, the perks of being a wallflower for the walls he'd built too high. By closing time, Elijah was sprawled on the reading room floor, back against a shelf of poetry, debating Kerouac's freedom with Theo over lukewarm vending machine sodas. Laughter came easy, surprising them both. Elijah's booming and unfiltered, Theo's a low rumble that vibrated through the quiet like bass notes in a symphony. It started small, those stolen hours. Elijah showing up by accident after lectures. Theo slipping him rare first editions under the pretense of research. Weeks blurred into a rhythm. Elijah's chaos softening at the edges. Theo's silence blooming into stories of his own. Over late-night chess games on the circulation desk, Theo always won, but let Elijah think he had a shot. Theo confessed fragments. Growing up in a sleepy Vermont town where being the quiet gay kid meant blending into the woodwork, coming out to parents who loved him but didn't quite get it, burying himself in books to escape the ache of invisibility. "Libraries don't care who you love," Theo said one night, pieces hovering mid-air. "They just hold space." Elijah's heart stuttered, the word gay hanging unspoken between them. A door cracked open. He'd always known his attractions swung that way, buried under layers of denial and deflection. But hearing it from Theo made it real, electric. One crisp October evening, as leaves skittered across the quad like confetti from a forgotten parade, Elijah found Theo in the rare books room, cataloging a crate of leather-bound volumes that smelled of aged vanilla and secrets. The air was thick with dust motes dancing in the slanted light, and Elijah's pulse thrummed as he approached, the weight of unspoken words pressing on his chest. "Theo," he started, voice rougher than intended. Shit, I don't do this. Feelings. But you're like the calm after all my storms, and I can't shake you." Theo turned, glasses fogged slightly from the room's humidity, his expression a mirror of Elijah's turmoil. Hope warring with caution, lips parted on a breath. Before doubt could claw back in, Elijah closed the distance, cupping Theo's face with hands that trembled despite the calluses from bar fights and bike crashes. Their kiss was tentative at first, soft presses testing boundaries. Theo's hands fisting in Elijah's shirt like he was afraid it'd vanish. Then hunger took over, mouths crashing with the pent-up force of library silences and stolen glances. tongues tangling in a dance that tasted of coffee and courage. Elijah poured everything into it, the recklessness he'd wielded like a weapon, now bent toward devotion. The loneliness he drowned in liquor, now surfacing as need. Theo responded with a fierceness that belied his quiet, pulling Elijah closer until spines of ancient texts dug into their backs, the world narrowing to the heat between them. They broke apart gasping, foreheads pressed together, laughter bubbling up through the haze. "I've wanted that since the night you stormed in," Theo whispered, fingers tracing the bruise on Elijah's cheek like it was a map to his soul. "But I didn't want to be another wreck for you to crash into." Elijah shook his head, the truth spilling free. "You're not a wreck, Theo. You're the goddamn harbor." That night, they didn't go further. Too much history to unpack, too many fears to name. But the promise lingered, a thread pulling them tighter. Winter descended on Boston like a heavy blanket, snow blanketing the Charles River in pristine white, turning the campus into a postcard of muffled magic. Elijah's life reshaped around Theo. Skipped keggers for study dates that devolved into makeout sessions in the periodical stacks. Mornings tangled in Theo's off-campus apartment. A cozy walk-up in Alston filled with overflowing bookshelves and the scent of brewing tea. Elijah cooked, badly. Theo read aloud from dog-eared novels while Elijah sketched him in the margins of his notebooks. Rough lines capturing the curve of his neck, the way his lashes fluttered during climaxes. It was domestic, intoxicating, a far cry from the hollow highs of his old life. But cracks formed, subtle at first. Elijah's frat brothers ribbed him endlessly. "Harper's gone soft for the book nerd?" And the pressure built, a tide eroding his resolve. One February night, after a brutal econ exam, he caved. Showed up at a house party on Beacon Hill, promising himself just one drink, 1 hour to prove he wasn't tamed. The bass thrummed through his veins like an old addiction, shots burning familiar paths down his throat. Jake was there, grudge nursed into a smirk, and before Elijah knew it, he was in a guest room upstairs, lips on some guy's neck, Tyler, from the lacrosse team, all easy grins and wandering hands. A blur of regret-fueled haze that ended with Elijah bolting for the bathroom, retching up the betrayal. He swore it was a one-off, a slip born of stress and stupidity, but guilt gnawed like frostbite. Theo noticed the distance, the late study sessions, the way Elijah flinched at casual touches. "Talk to me," Theo urged one evening, snow tapping the window like impatient fingers, his hazel eyes searching Elijah's face over half-eaten ramen. Elijah deflected with jokes, kisses that bruised from desperation, but the lie festered. Spring break loomed, a week apart with Theo visiting family in Vermont, and Elijah promised himself redemption. Instead, isolation amplified the voices. Texts from Tyler, "That was hot, round 2. Voicemails from Jake, "You couldn't quit the game." The night before Theo left, they made love for the first time. Slow, reverent, in the flicker of bedside candles. Theo's body was a revelation. Lean planes and freckles like constellations, gasps that shattered his composure into something wild and wanting. Elijah mapped him with lips and hands, whispering apologies into skin he didn't deserve, their rhythms syncing like verses in a shared poem. "I love you," Theo breathed in the afterglow, fingers threading through Elijah's hair. And the words hit like sunlight on snow, blinding, melting Elijah's defenses. "I love you too," he echoed, meaning it fiercer than breath, but the secret coiled tighter, a serpent in his gut. Theo's absence stretched like taffy, sweet at first. Late-night calls filled with "I miss yous" and recitations of E. Cummings, but souring as Elijah's isolation festered. He ghosted Tyler, dodged parties, threw himself into finals prep in the library's empty corners, chasing absolution in annotated margins. But on the third night, buzzed on stolen bourbon from his roommate's stash, he cracked. Met Tyler at a dive bar off Commonwealth Avenue, the dim lights and jukebox blues blurring lines he'd sworn to hold. It was quick, mechanical. A fumble in the alley that left Elijah hollow, Tyler's parting slap on his ass a mocking echo of Jake's old taunts. Back in his dorm, phone clutched like a lifeline. Elijah scrolled Theo's texts. Photos of Vermont hills dusted pink at dawn. Captions like, "Thinking of your chaos in this quiet." Tears burned tracks down his face, the weight of his duplicity crushing. He drafted confessions, deleted them. Paced the room until dawn, the city stirring below like it didn't care about his unraveling. When Theo returned, train-weary and windswept, Elijah met him at South Station with roses and a smile that cracked at the edges. Their reunion was feverish. Tumbled into bed, bodies colliding with the urgency of separation. But Theo pulled back mid-kiss, eyes narrowing. "What's wrong? You're elsewhere." Elijah broke then, words tumbling in a torrent. The party, the kiss, the alley. Every sordid detail laid bare, voice cracking on sobs that shook the bed frame. Theo listened, face paling to parchment, hands clenched in the sheets like anchors, silence stretched, taut as a bowstring, before Theo whispered, "I trusted you, not with perfection, with your mess, but this, you chose the storm over us." He stood, pulling on clothes with mechanical grace, and Elijah begged, on his knees literally, grasping at Theo's wrist. "I'm sorry, God. I'm so sorry. It was nothing, a stupid. Nothing." Theo's voice rose, cracking for the first time, eyes glistening with unshed fury. "It was us you risked, Elijah. Me. For what, a hit of the old high. I thought you saw me, saw this." He gestured wildly at the apartment, the books, their tangled life. The door slammed behind him, the echo reverberating like a final period, leaving Elijah alone with the roses wilting on the floor. Days blurred into a gray haze. Elijah haunted the library like a penitent ghost, shelving returns under Theo's distant supervision. Their interactions clipped to "pass the ladder" or "barcode this." Whispers rippled through campus. Elijah Harper, the wild one, tamed and then shattered. But he barely registered them, numb to the frat's invitations, the pitying glances. He quit drinking cold, channeling the void into runs along the Charles at dawn, lungs burning with each stride, mind replaying Theo's words like a looped track. Therapy sessions at the student health center peeled back layers. The fear of stillness rooted in his dad's abandonment when he was 12. The way love felt like a trap until Theo made it feel like home. Theo, meanwhile, armored himself in routine. Extra shifts, poetry slams at local cafes where his voice turned verses into weapons. But cracks showed. Forgotten due dates. A tremor in his hand when Elijah's name appeared on a checkout slip. Mutual friends. Lila from the lit department, who'd bonded them over shared Bukowski rants. Mediated awkwardly, spilling tea over coffee that neither wanted. "He's a mess without you," she'd tell Theo. "And you're fading without his light," she'd chide Elijah. It culminated in a rain-lashed May afternoon. The library emptying for summer break. Elijah lingering in the doorway as thunder grumbled overhead. Theo was at his desk, head bowed over a stack of journals, curls damp from the leak in the roof they'd both laughed about once. "I can't do this halfway," Elijah said, voice steady despite the storm in his chest. "I fucked up royally, epically, but I'm not the guy who stormed in here anymore. I'm trying, Theo, for you, for us, if you'll let me." Theo looked up, glasses streaked with rain he'd wiped from his face, expression a tempest of hurt and longing. "Trying isn't enough if it's just words. Show me." What followed was raw, unscripted. A confrontation in the stacks where accusations flew like lightning. Theo's fear of being the safe choice after Elijah's wild flings. Elijah's terror of boring into oblivion without his edge. They shouted until voices hoarsed, then collapsed against a shelf of American Lit, tears mingling with the downpour seeping through the skylight. "I choose you," Elijah vowed, hands framing Theo's face, thumbs brushing away salt-streaked doubt. Every messy, quiet, beautiful inch. Theo searched his eyes, then surged forward, kiss fierce and forgiving, a dam breaking. Summer unfurled slow and sweet, a probation of sorts. Road trip to the Cape in Theo's beat-up Subaru, windows down, Springsteen blasting as they chased sunsets over dunes. Elijah interned at a Southie community center, channeling his fire into mentoring at-risk kids, teaching them chess moves that doubled as life lessons the way Theo had taught him. Theo audited a course on queer lit at Harvard Extension, his essays blooming with vulnerability that mirrored their shared journals now. Nights were for healing, conversations by firelight where betrayals were dissected like cadavers, trust rebuilt brick by fragile brick. Fall semester dawned golden, Elijah trading his flannel for button-downs on lecture days, but keeping the chaos for Theo alone. Surprise picnics in the fens, whispered sonnets in the dark. The frat faded to periphery, Jake's olive branch accepted with a nod but no beers. One crisp November eve, as snow flurried like first-date nerves, Theo knelt in their Alston kitchen. Not with rings, but with a battered copy of Gatsby, inscribed on the flyleaf. To my reckless heart, let's write our own green light. Forever yours, Theo. Elijah pulled him up, laughter choking on joy, their embrace a vow etched in ink and inkling. In the quiet library of their lives, amid the stacks of second chances, they'd found not just love, but the story worth telling. One of storms tamed, silences sung, and two souls anchoring each other against the tide. And as Boston's skyline glittered beyond the window, Elijah knew. He'd been reckless once, but now he was home.